Well, if you're a general manager or a membership director, there is a very good chance that you know Gregg Patterson. He is a fixture at CMAA World Conference and also PCMA's annual conference, which is actually where I met him for the first time back in 2018 or 2019, something like that. And I was completely transfixed by the guy, his energy, his presence, his industry knowledge. He was absolutely inspiring. Gregg spent nearly 35 years as the general manager at the Beach Club in Santa Monica. He was the AGM at the Bel Air Country Club for 8 years before that. Today, he is still presenting. He is still teaching and mentoring as the founder and president of Tribal Magic. Gregg is all about building community. So when I decided to take on the topic of bridging the generational divide at clubs, I went straight to the tribal magician himself. We talk about bringing like-minded members together regardless of their age. We talk about the critical role the GM plays and how educating board members starts long before they actually serve. Also, you're going to hear me reference an article that I read in which Gregg was a contributor, and at the moment I couldn't remember when it was or what it was, but it was the August of 2021 issue of Boardroom Magazine. Coincidentally, it was called Tribal Magic. But in the moment, like I said, I couldn't remember. But anyway, a wonderful conversation with a man that I've had a lot of respect for many years. And here's my conversation with Gregg Patterson. You're listening to Crushing Club Marketing, a podcast for progressive club leaders ready to increase their club's revenue. Time for change begins right now. Gregg Patterson, thank you so much for joining me.
It's good to be with you, Ed. I look forward to the conversation.
Yeah, I don't want to embarrass you with this, but I have to tell you, I think I first saw you speak it was either CMAA or I definitely remember seeing you at PCMA in Dallas
Right.
a number of years ago. And I developed a man crush on you. I'm like, I love that guy.
Yeah.
And I found myself kind of following you around, and I've always appreciated not only your insight, but your enthusiasm for your work and for, I'd say probably how you approach every day. I mean,
Well,
I know
I'm a
that
lover of the club business and all that clubs deliver. So it's easy to get excited about something you really like. So I've always been buzzed. What can you say?
well, you're passionate about a lot of things, but I appreciate you taking some time today to talk about this topic. And I guess to start out, you have spent a lot of years in the club industry. I know a lot of years as a general manager and now as a consultant. When you look at this sort of like, might be a bigger term than it is, but this generational divide that some clubs are experiencing, how is this different than what has happened for years at clubs with younger members and older members?
See, Ed, what I find interesting, I don't see any divide at all. I mean, it's always been this way. The older generation looks at the younger generation like they're dumb as a rock, or they don't have the same interests. And then that generation gets old and they look at the younger generation. So I think it's been overly dramatized. I think what's interesting, Ed, about it is that the human condition is unchanged. The needs that people want from clubs is unchanged. How you deliver that is different. Like the affinity groups, I'm very big on affinity groups. I'm a big motorcycle guy. At the Beach Club, I created the Big Bore Bikers. My wife thought they were boring bikers, but the idea is it was an affinity group. Now, it's more fun to be a member than the manager, so now I'm a member. But I run the nonfiction book club, and I facilitate the discussion. What people want is an excuse to be connected. And so how they connect is different. Maybe they connect with video games now. I've seen some clubs where they have video game days and they bring them in. All of that changes. It used to be, I remember that nobody wanted to sit outside on a porch, in daylight, like the Bel Air Country Club where it was, fabulous club, but it had no porch. Now they've built a new clubhouse and there's a huge porch area. So, but the idea is that people want to gather, right? So that impulse has not changed. So when you talk about marketing, I always say, find out what they want, give it to them. It's a very simple definition of marketing, but that's really the essence of it, isn't it? So I think I know what people want. My question is, how do I give it to them? right?
Right.
Whether it's, say, a bicycle, or whether it's the sports they have, or the exercise equipment. When I got to the beach club, and when I was first getting this business in 1974, the idea of having a gym at the club was radical. Nobody would do it. We're not going to put money in that. The dumbest thing in the rock. You would not build a club now without an enormous exercise facility, correct? So
Yeah.
the need, the tactic for satisfying the need has changed, Ed, but the needs have not. And
Got
the
it.
question is, that's why, obviously, I'm a humanities guy. My background's history and minored in philosophy, that sort of thing. And the idea is the understanding of the human condition is frankly unchanged. But what
Mhm.
we as leaders have to do is say, how can we tap into that? Like, I'll give you an example. In my nonfiction book club, 50% of the people read, 50% listen to it. Now, do I denigrate those people? Absolutely not. It's just a different way, a different tactic. So anyway,
Right.
that's what I see. So this divide has always existed between generations, nothing new.
Yeah, so let's take one of your I mean, your consulting, tribal magic.
Right.
Like, how does can you kind of relate tribal magic with this and your approach with building that kind of culture and how you see
Absolutely.
it?
Understand, man has a need for herd. I say that we are born with a DNA need for herd and community. And a tribe is just another way of saying community. I guess see community magic or whatever it might be, but it's tribal magic because also tribe, there's a burden of proof before you get into a tribe and a trial by fire in a tribe. The best clubs I know have a rigorous admissions process. As a matter of fact, just before I got on with you, I've known a young man who's applying for membership at the Beach Club for 28 years, since he was born. So they call me up. He's now a pilot with Delta Airlines. He's a very accomplished young man. And, they talk to me, and that's sort of what club is. It's a tribe, but he still has to go through the process. He has to have that stamp of approval. And that's the trial by fire, the burden of proof. And so that really hasn't changed in any way. And one of the great things about clubs, the best clubs, have a filtering process so that you get people of common interest in needs, wants, and expectations. So that's unchanged.
So I want to just dive into that a little bit because there's a level of, probably misunderstanding
Mhm.
around a very rigorous admissions process into
Right,
a club, right?
right,
They're too snobby. You
right.
have to have this, you have to have that, which is the outsider perspective, but let's talk about what a rigorous process means for the club and its culture and the tribe.
Most clubs that I deal with, forget the financial stuff and everything like that. They're wondering if you are compatible. I'll give you an example. One of the things we had a very long and rigorous process at the beach club. But one of the things that you had to do, you and your spouse, say, would come down. You had to sit in the bar for a while to wait for your meeting with the committee, and you had to go a number of times on different occasions. But what they were always checking was to see if you opened up to the people at the table beside you. Did you talk to those people? Did you talk to the bartender? Were you gracious and understanding? I think the key thing to a successful club member is relationship building capacity. So, are you an interesting person? And are you likable? The rest, people talk about, oh, exclusionary. It might have been at one time, but I'd like to say that what we're looking for are people that we want to hang with, right? Would I sit down beside this person for a couple of hours and have an engaged conversation and be enthused about being with them? And all the other stuff. Yes, yes, yes. It was a winnowing process in the old days. Oh, are they of the upper class and all that? I don't think that applies anymore because a lot of people obviously have the finances now to become club members. One of the things that is different is that these people have less experience in clubs than the old school did, right? Because they didn't come from
Right.
a club background. So it's my job as the manager to acculturate them, to have the club acculturate them. So it's like I would look at you and I say, God, Ed's got personality, he's got the buzz, he's got experience. I like being around Ed. what he does is incidental to the fact that he has the human qualities, the people qualities that make him a good member. And I think that's what we're looking for. Yeah, I mean, the clubs have gotten a bad reputation. Look, we're in Santa Monica, California, and they're about as anti-club, I shouldn't say this, as a community can be, right? As a government, oh, they're evil, they're evil. It's like, hold it, look what we give back to the community. Look at, I employed 120 people and I gave them wonderful lives and dignity and status. And what are you talking about? So I think that's an old way of looking at clubs. And there's a new way of looking at clubs, like this is our tribe. And the example I always give, Ed, would you just let anybody walk into your home? No, you wouldn't. You'd like to say, oh, they would be compatible with my wife and me. They'd be compatible with the sort of house I have. The same thing is true with a club. So it's not about what school you went to, because a lot of people have gone to great schools and are boring as a goddamn rock, Ed. And no, I hate to say it, but it's true. And then other people, you might have gone to a junior college, become very successful in business, and are an absolutely fascinating, wonderful human being that reads books,
Yeah.
that plays sports, that travels the world. So I think those days are gone. What we are looking for in a club, do we want to have let's go back to the fundamentals of the club. Do I want to have a relationship with this guy? Do I think this guy would fit into one of my community that is an affinity group within the club? And would they fit into a Christmas celebration we have at the club? And,
Mhm.
are they trying to escape from the madness which is in the world? And do they like the stuff that we have? Like one of the things I talk about, Ed, with clubs, they love to talk about their stuff. I say, hold it. I'm more concerned about, is there heat in the spaces your club provides? And heat is generated by staff and members. So
Mhm.
you let in the right members into your tribe that have the buzz. You let the right staff in who have the buzz. Your club will have buzz. And all of a sudden they're paying $150,000 to get into the stupid door. Now but that becomes a problem, you see, because people say, oh, it's so expensive. So's houses here in Los Angeles are
Y
houses. I mean, you can't buy
Yeah.
here in Texas, they can buy a 5,000 square foot house with 3 acres of land, and they could only buy a garage here in Los Angeles.
Right.
The
Yeah.
price,
Yeah.
forget about money. Forget about money. It's about relationship building skills. Anyway,
Yeah.
I'd like to have
It's an
you as
interest
a partner. I mean, because
Yeah. No.
I'd buy you a couple of Mai Tais and you would loosen up.
I have a hard time with that. No, I love that. So let me just go back to a couple things and butt two thoughts together, which is do they have the buzz, the energy, right? And yet, so it's in so many clubs, the people who are making the decisions about, who's coming into the club
Right, right,
tend to be older. Right.
right.
So you see these younger people and they don't understand. They don't talk like they don't ask me any questions. They're not interesting. They're not curious. They might be great with other young people, but how do you, what's the answer for addressing that disconnect of like, the old board members, the old committee members and the young people?
That's the role of the general manager. We are the
Uh,
influencers. We have to educate these people. I mean, you can't be a general manager unless you're an educator of staff, but also of members and boards and committees. It's powerful stuff. My job is to, through, just continuous conversation. And I love committees. I love the board because that's where you can talk about those things. They say, well, God, they don't ask questions. We understand that they don't, but if you ask them a question, they're very engaged. So it's a different situation, right? And so
right.
my job as manager, my job as an assistant manager or supervisor, during my interaction with those old geeky people, because I'm one of those old geeky people. Don't you understand that? I'm one of those people. It's very gracious of you to suggest I'm not, but I am. But I am an influencer. If you put me on a committee, I can have an influence. So your general manager is an influencer of their thinking. Now, some clubs, they revel in the fact that they're constipated. I shouldn't say that, but they do. They like to say, "Oh, we're old and traditional," and that sort of thing, and I said, "Yeah, and you're boring as a rock, and you're not gonna attract young people. So just
Right.
accept you're just gonna attract old people, I'm happy for you." But if you're like the beach club, I use it as an example because I love the club and, again, love it more now as a member.
Right.
But we deal in a broad spectrum of people. We have kids, we have old people. Nobody leaves until they die. And it's like 12 new members a year. Why do they stay? It's because somehow we've brought all those generations together, right? Now,
Right.
they don't all do stuff together, but they're empathetic to the other people. They understand the wants, needs, and expectations. If you have a board, and I had 34 presidents. I was general manager 34 years, 34 presidents. It was glorious. And the whole idea is they came up through the government structure where I was able to educate them, not about anything, but about people and generations and governance and all this stuff. So by the time they're on the board, they don't see young people, they don't have this cynical attitude toward young people. And you've heard this, Ed,
Right.
talking crap about, oh, these young people, they don't read. I said, yeah, they don't read, but they're very bright. They listen, they watch, they're bright, but
Mhm.
people who denigrate quickly, who are negative quickly, one should not be in the governance process to begin with,
Mm.
right? You've got to weed them out. And
Yeah.
that doesn't happen all the time, Ed, and that's a tragedy.
Right. I wanna read a quote that I read that you wrote,
Mm.
and just to talk through this a little bit because I thought it was brilliant. Um, and this was in I can't remember what article it was in. It's something I read. Tell me if you didn't say it, just tell me. Say, I never said it. But it said, the board needs to understand the club's culture and needs to be fluent in the principles and practices of that culture. Board members need to smell the future to become fluent
Exactly.
in what's happening out
Yeah,
there in the world and
yeah,
how what's happening will affect the club. They need to be educated in the culture as it is now, as it should be, what
yeah,
needs to be done, and how the board will take the culture from here to there. The culture needs to be dissected and questions asked. What is our governance process? What is our why for being? What good services and programs are needed to express that why?
uh,
What type of facility is needed to deliver those goods? How do we finance all that? What type of members and staff do we need? And to properly educate the board, they need to analyze the culture.
yeah.
It starts with that, does it
Yeah.
not?
It does. It's interesting. Yes, I wrote that because when I talk about culture, every club, every home has a culture, and it's the basic things. Who makes the decisions, which is governance, right? Who executes that decisions? What is the why? And I always say, that's my job. That's the manager's job. People say, oh, the manager just does what the board says. No, they don't pay me the big bucks to just do what they say. My job is to nudge them into the future. My job is to help them smell a future that's going to hit them in the face, right?
Right.
It's going to hit them in the faces. I look at as a historian, history. Uh, History is the past, but there are lessons. A manager deals with the present, and a strategist looks to the future, smells of the future. Somebody who manages must understand all three of those components. It's like, by way of example, if you're going to renovate your clubhouse, you better be able to smell what people are going to want. What percentage of floor space should be dedicated to X, Y, and Z, or whatever it might be. And the excitement for me is that my job as a manager was to guide that culture into the future. But everything that you're talking about there, what are the good services and programs that you want? Remember when I got in the club business back in 1974, you weren't even around. I know for a fact you weren't, right?
I was
But in
a young boy.
1974, and I use as an example the gym. They were out of sight, out of mind. Only the athletic clubs downtown had gyms, right? Now you
Right.
can't imagine it. What you needed to do, I remember when I came to the beach club, what I turned into the gym had been the nursery, right? And there weren't that many kids in there because people were not having kids like they once did. And I said, I have a vision of the good. And where do you get this vision from? That's why we go to a world conference. That's why we read Boardroom Magazine. That's why, we're very active here in California with podcasts and webinars and all that. Every one of those gives you insight. What hurts me, Ed, is to see managers who aren't curious, right? They
Right.
don't ask those questions. I'll give you an example. I do a lot of stuff at conferences, you were just down
Right.
there.
Yeah.
And I was doing these open table sessions or open space sessions. I had one, but I sat in on the two before me. They were fabulous, but nobody asked a question. So of course I'm asking questions. And the person who was responding was, and I tell people, it's like Robin Stoll, is a great lawyer, club lawyer. She was
Yeah.
just giving stuff free, right?
Right.
It's like, dude, you'd pay her $1,000 an hour to get this stuff. But they
Yeah.
don't ask questions. You've got to be curious. What is the future? And, it's like with me, I'm an old geeky guy, but I'm probably more tapped into the future than most young people because I
Hmm.
read, I question, and I try to give those tools to others. I have this thing called, every manager has an idea bank. People, places, and ideas, and you categorize it so I can find all sorts of stuff. It's like 700 or 800 pages of this I got, but I can find it quickly. It's like,
Yeah.
that's my job, like women in golf. I remember years ago, I was in Australia doing something, and I was at a conference I was speaking at, and the head of the women in golf in Australia was there. I'm writing down everything this girl is saying, and it's like, brilliant. This is what women want. Let's open our clubs up. And if you've noticed, clubs are embracing women as never before. But all you gotta do is you gotta listen. You gotta
Right.
look. You
Right.
gotta ask, you know?
So in this sense, what you're saying and what I hear you saying is that it is the manager's job to lead the board with that vision, right? Because
Absolutely.
board members turn over, like, and they're going to come and go, but people who are committed professionals
Right,
that are paid in many ways to stay
right,
ahead,
right.
right?
But
Go ahead.
the manager is institutional memory, first of all.
Right.
I connect you with the past. I'm the totem with the past, but you're a futurist. That's why if I had my career to do over, on my business card, it'd say the umbrella. I wrote an article about this, but my job is to be the umbrella over the whole organization, to see the big picture and everything. And part of the umbrella is to see the storm coming, right? And to have the umbrella in my hand, right? We know an earthquake's coming at some point to California. Get ready, dude. Get the insurance together, get the emergency procedures. You know it's coming, right?
Yeah.
And that is my job. And that's exciting, Ed. As
Yeah.
as a history student, people are business majors now. I was a history major. I was a humanities major. And history is about patterns that exist throughout time, right? And part of it is to be able to look to the future. What will those needs be? And
Right.
that's exciting. What a job. I should pay
Well,
them to have the job.
no. And one of the
That
things though
Forget
that
that, Ed.
you are such a, so visionary, and you're able to get people to follow because
Right,
you're a bold leader.
right,
But you said another thing that I read in the same article, and you said that the education of board members begins a long time before they're selected to serve. And what I love about that is that like, you're not in the position, you weren't in the position as a general manager as you were to be able to tell the board, hey, this is a storm that's coming, right?
right.
But you educated the right people to put on the board rather
Exactly.
than just taking what was given and having to persuade people.
Right.
So
See
tell me
see,
more
the
about how you educate these board
Yeah. Well
members
well
before
well,
they
this
serve.
is it's the most fascinating thing for good club governance, and any board member listening should keep this in mind. First of all, I was a scout. I was looking for talent that wasn't on committees. And then the board, past presidents, all that, were scouts with me, and we'd talk about our job was to smell out talent, potential. And then our job was to get them on committees, right? We don't, oh, would you like to be on a committee? No, we reached out and grabbed people because we saw potential. Now, at the start of each year, I just tell you, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I love talking about the
No,
topic.
I love
Uh,
it.
what you do is I'd start out each year on every committee with a governance outline, and I would talk about governance of the club. Who makes decisions? I talk about the club culture, basic things. So, and you had to serve on three committees of within the last 10 years, max a minimum of 5 years, that sort of thing,
Sure.
because you had to drink the Kool-Aid before you got on the board. And at the start, and because I helped the committee chairman to make the agenda. But the first thing on each agenda was a global club issue. And so, say you're on the House Committee and your food and beverages, your specialty, but you have to talk about membership demographics and how it's changed as the first question. So everybody was getting a global understanding while they work on a committee with a specific understanding. You see what I mean?
Mhm.
And so
Yes.
over time, they started to understand what's going on. Then you are observing how people, do they ask questions? Do they do the assignments they're given? Are they a contributor? Are they collaborative? I mean, I have
Do
like
they
a
show up?
checklist. Yeah, and show up. I have a checklist of things we're looking for in committee people. Then what you say, okay, this is a talented person. Let's move them on to another committee to flesh them out a little bit more, or even like membership. We'd keep them on membership committee for say 4 years, right? So they really get to know people in the process because that's critical to it. Then you move them around and you get them, and then because I could. Usually the president and I would sit down and say, well, okay, of all these people, and we'd have a list of people, all the people that had served that were targeted people. And we had
Mhm.
like 115 people on this list. So we had a lot of talent, right? So
Mhm.
one year we might lead lawyers, another year's contractors. You have different needs. So we
Right.
go through and say, okay, those are 7 really talented people, any one of which would be great. They've drunk the Kool-Aid. Now you might say, oh, that's bad. It isn't bad. They've drunk the club Kool-Aid, right?
Right.
And then you go through, then there's a nominating committee, which is the 3 past presidents. Now understand, I've had influence about who became president and all that, and their education is complete. I meet with them every week. They really understand, and the chairman of the committees. I like meeting with people and talking, and so we were ex officio on the selection committee, right, for the board
Right.
members, and so we didn't vote, but they heard us. And then
Right.
they would vote on 3 people, but they'd come back. They'd start with, say, 7. They'd go to the board and they say, well, here are 7 people. This are our needs. What are your thoughts on these? And they get opinions from the board, not let the board decide. Then they take it back and then they'd hone it down. And then they would select, if there are 3 openings, they'd select 3 people. It wasn't a contested election. And
Sure.
then when they come on the board, the board every year got the comprehensive governance orientation, where you go on in great detail about the mission of the club, the issues, the global issues, the specific issues, and all that. And then you'd assign them to the committees. But you already knew what their talents were, right? You already knew if they were
Right. Yep.
collaborative or not. You knew if they did their homework because they had gone through a filtering process. So many times in clubs, they have people that just they have contested elections. I know a couple of clubs that still have this. It's a horror story, right? People might not have any experience, Ed, and they put their name in the hat. They buy drinks for everybody. They end up getting on the board. It's like a
Right.
horror story. And I can tell you horror stories of people who haven't control is the wrong word, to influence. My job is to nudge, to influence those who make the decisions, right?
Sure.
And having they get on the board, and all of a sudden they get a new board. They say, well, the three groups that hired me and the 9 people who hired me are gone, right? Say 3 years you get. And that's the average
Yep.
length of time a manager survives. Interesting. And what's
Wow.
interesting about that, Eddie, it's usually 3 years before everyone who hired them is gone, right?
Right.
So all of a sudden they got a new board. They had no control over what's coming on, and they lose their job. And it's a real tragedy. Really talented people, Ed, lose their jobs. And so, yeah, I'm very big. One of the
That's
things
interesting.
I say, I want to have influence over the governance process because I want to keep my job. I
Right.
want
Because in that point, you're leading. Then you are leading.
exactly. I want to keep the job, and I want to be happy, right?
Right, right, yeah. So, boy, there are a couple things that popped into my head, about this, and, the first thing I wanna ask you is just a contrarian approach is, if I'm a general manager and I hear this, I'm like, "I don't have time to do all that stuff.
Right.
I've got, I've got all these other things. I don't have time to go recruit members for and do all these governance sessions. Like, how can I do all that?"
Well, you do it because you know that's your job, right? The fact is, people don't do it. I love it when people say, I'm a CEO. I think of the big thoughts. I don't worry about the daily stuff. I said, dude, the daily stuff will kill you. Those bridge
Right.
players out there, if they don't like you, they will kill you.
Right.
The guys that hang around the bar, if they don't like you, they'll kill you. It's like I
Right.
tell managers, "You wanna survive, dude? These
Yeah.
are ways I'm giving you the tactics for doing it." I made it for 34 years. It was a love fest. I'm a member now. I couldn't be happier. It was a love
Sure.
fest. And they say, "Oh, Greg, I have no time for that." Great. I don't care, right? I've had my thing.
Right.
But if you're hiring me to help you get better, I can tell you how to do it. If you say you got no time for it, it's great. Like people and tell me they don't have time to read. How come I read 2 books a week and they can't read a magazine, right? You see what I mean? What I learned a long time ago, you can do what you choose to do and have prioritize.
Got
I
it.
prioritize the people side of the club equation. I had a controller. I love to digest numbers, but I didn't create numbers. I digested it. I understand
So
it.
and you prioritize people in a different way. I mean, from what I'm hearing you say, really, is that you spend time with people, but every time you're with them, you're sort of analyzing a little bit, right? Like,
Oh,
what could they do? Where are they in the club? Are they rising? Are they falling? Are they right? Instead of just walking around the club and checking
oh,
in on people,
yeah, it's not
how
that at
are
all.
you
You
today?
know, what really and what binds you to club is what I call substantive conversation. Look, all these young people I knew growing up give me the big hug when they see me now, and I've been retired 10 years from the club. And the reason is you have an impact on people. And aren't we in a business about relationship building, community building? We want to have an impact. I mean, here's this kid, 28 years. I'm the oldest person that knows him on his list because he's 28 years old. I've known him since
Yeah.
birth. And I'm at the top of the reference list because I'm a reference for him. And you
Yeah.
sit back and say, hold it. It's like, is that bad? I mean, I've officiated at 75 member weddings. Is that
Wow. Yeah.
bad? And you say, oh, I've got no
Right.
time for it. I said, I'm happy for you, dude. I made the big bucks. I got the airplane. You don't. I don't care.
Right.
You see what I
Yeah.
mean, man?
I do.
And
I do.
you find time for what's important.
Y-
People are important. Now, finances, believe me, when you go to your grave, nobody's gonna say, "Oh, yeah, they really took care of club finances." They'll fire you if you don't. You've gotta do that. I'm saying that's
For
ground zero.
sure.
You
Sure.
gotta but business is easy. What's
Right.
tough is
People are hard.
people, Ed.
People are hard.
People
I'm with you. So let
no
me go
manager
back.
no manager I know has been fired because, oh, their numbers weren't good. They got fired because they couldn't explain the goddamn numbers to a finance committee.
Right.
Yeah.
I just want to go back to creating the tribe for a different type of club. When you have a club that's sought after and people are trying to get into, it's one thing,
Right.
right? There are a lot of clubs that we talk to and we come across that um during the pandemic, a lot of people were let into the club that maybe otherwise wouldn't have been let in. Right? So now they've got this sort of built-in culture issue. How do they start to right the ship if they're struggling and they feel like, "Oh my gosh, we made a big mistake. We let too many people in."
First of all, the thing they have to do is communicate, right? And communication comes in all sorts of different forms. The manager is the trumpet of the board to begin with, right? And I put a lot on the manager's shoulders. My job is to find out where those fissures are, those cracks in the culture, and to
Mhm.
fill them somehow. So the manager is out there and dealing with those people and trying to mitigate the bad behaviors that they had to amplify the good. There's a good that they came in with. Maybe they pay the dues. Maybe that's the only good they have. But there is good within everybody. Your job is to mitigate the net less than good stuff. And
Mhm.
it's difficult. People, what's funny is, and a lot of it's changing around now because during the pandemic, clubs got flooded with people because you're outdoors and you do it. What they
Right.
found now is all of a sudden the enthusiasm for golfing clubs has started coming down. The
Right.
reality has come back again. So what I told everybody at that time, did you put your hooks into those people when they were members so that you embrace them because the downturn was coming? So what one thing happens during that downturn is the bad will start to exit anyway because you
Sure.
need enough core good people that they discourage the bad from being there. The other thing is, I always talk about, I love to put contrarians on different committees, right? New members on committees. And the reason is say we had 10 people on our committees. 9 people have drunk the Kool-Aid, that one person haven't. Those 9 people are influencers over that person's thinking. So when you
Mhm.
look at a club, there are certain influencers you have. Maybe it's sports. Maybe you talk about golf. They get paired with, the people who are really club. So instead of playing with their foursome, which are always Yahoo types or whatever it might be, you pair them with somebody else. This is where your starter's important. Or
Mhm.
who do they sit near? Or do you have the chef come out in a personal way and speak to them? It's like, what are
Mhm.
the key thing is, what are the behaviors you're uncomfortable with those people? One of the things that you're talking about that I mentioned earlier was a lot of the people that have come into clubs don't have club in their background. They have to be
Right.
acculturated to club. And that's a slow process. The first step in the process, I'll be candid with you, I loved orienting new members. Again, I only had 12 or so new members a year. They had to go through you could pay your money, you could go through the process a year and a half, but you couldn't use your membership until you went through the general manager's orientation. And it was a
Mm.
fun, upbeat, but it was 4 hours, right?
Right.
And it was back and forth, and it was a love fest at the end, right? That is my opportunity one on one, or usually it's husband and wife,
Sure. Yeah,
one
yeah,
on
yeah.
one,
Right.
me and them, really re-educating them, revamping their thinking. And then every time they connected with me, they became part of that experience. I give a lot of
Yeah.
responsibility board. They often give, oh, the membership director orients new members. Yeah, if you have to, I guess, in a large club. But I am the symbol of the club. The manager is the
Right.
symbol, right?
Yeah.
I am the ultimate influencer of behavior, right? So they come in, they
Yeah.
don't have it. My job is to influence behavior.
Is that kind of unfair? I mean, I know what you're saying, but I'd love for you to just like you're electric. I mean, I've seen you enough to know that. I mean, I hear you coming down the hall,
Yeah.
but everyone wants to talk to you. Like
Yeah. Right.
everyone wants to get a minute with Gregg Patterson, but not every general manager is like that.
Yeah.
Not everyone has that in them. What do you tell those guys or
Well,
those
what
women?
what you find out is you are judged by your lieutenants as a leader, right? Let us be real. So if you don't have that skills, if you're really uh, a quiet, reserved in the office type of manager, and there's a need for that. I'm not saying there isn't. You
Sure.
better have somebody, an AGM or somebody who has that electricity, right?
Yeah.
And it's huge. So obviously I have deficiencies, right? That's why I married my wife. She's the clever one in our household. Right? No, no, no. I don't know if you've met Elaine. She's
Yeah.
bright. She's sophisticated. I'm a dancing monkey. We
Yeah.
both know that. But I was clever enough to recognize my deficiencies, Ed. And
Right.
I married the person just like she's not my lieutenant, she's my emperor. Anyway, whatever it might be. But the
Yeah.
fact of the matter is, I was aware enough of my shortcomings to know that the person I married had to compensate and fill those holes. Uh, I give you, I'm a dancing monkey. I had 2 assistant managers. One of them was an opera singer. I happen to like opera. She was an assistant
Oh, wow.
manager of mine for 30 years. So the other one for
Wow.
25 years, who was a cultural anthropology person. But they didn't have my personality because I get out there. But they had
Right.
a logic. They were in a sense like my wife. They could say, "Oh, Greg, yeah, he gets wild and crazy sometimes. He's crazy, but let me tell you what he really means." Right? I would take them, and the controller, I call them the 3 sisters, went to every committee and board meeting with me because I would do the dancing monkey, and then people say, "Oh, Greg, thank you, Kathy, who is my controller. Do we have the money for this?" And yes, because of course they drunk the Kool-Aid. See, I was clever enough to know that I needed people like that to assist me. I didn't need another dancing monkey. I mean, I
Right.
was the dancing monkey, but I needed the logical human being who they'd look at and they'd talk to you and they'd shake their head and say, "Yes, Greg, he's entertaining. I believe you." But it comes back to, but understand this, it comes back to something I talk about all the time is facts will persuade, but people are moved to act by emotion. I mean, obviously, that's one of the problems with our politics right now, whatever. But I know a lot of managers that give all the things they say, "Oh, we should do this for these 10 reasons, look at the chart." And all of a sudden I get up there and do the dancing monkey. They say yes,
Right.
because you have to open up their ears, and the emotion opens the ears and the
Right.
mind. Yeah, and that's
It's the
I try to tell managers that. It's like, yeah, we have to be all that. We have to be accountants. But you can persuade people with facts, but to get them to act, they have to be persuaded by emotion. That's what
right.
moves them. So
Is that it's the old Maya Angelou saying? It's not what you say or do; it's how you make people feel, or something around that. Yeah,
I'll tell you,
totally.
the quote is, she said, "People will forget what you said, they will
Right.
forget what you did, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And you hit it right on the nose, Ed. I should pay you
Yeah.
for that.
No,
'Cause
I'm just reiterating what you said. But, all right, so let's just bring this back, and I swear I could probably talk to you for hours until you get sick of me, but, um, let's a lot of general managers know who you are and have heard you and understand your position and, or have been inspired by you. A lot of board members maybe have not. So if you're listening to the podcast as a board member
Yeah,
and you're trying to figure out this generational thing and building a tribe and a lot of the things we're talking about, you've thrown out so many great ideas. The last is being almost, one of those is like building the right team, not just from a skill set, but from an emotional perspective as well. But
abs
if if you're a board member at a club that you feel like, boy, we're really struggling with our culture right now, where do you start?
Well, yeah, to me, I hate to say this to general managers because I talk to a lot of boards. I said, you start with the manager. Leadership matters. That's the vision of the good. Now,
Mhm.
if you have truly deep financial problems, the manager's got to have deep financial interest in that. If you have a cultural problem, they have to have a deep understanding of the 7 principles of culture, right? And how to weave those together. Like, yeah, you talk to, say, Discoveryland, fabulous operation. I've done work with them, they're fabulous. But they've got money coming out the yazoo. And the fact is, most clubs don't. So, how do you do more with less? How do you take what Discoveryland does and say, okay, how can we personalize that and customize that for our club? And that's what all of this comes down to. Every club is different, but the principles I'm talking about are universal and constant, right? So, how can we translate these principles into our club? And that's
Mhm.
the key right there.
Yeah, I love it. Greg, thank you so much for your time and your insight. And like I said, I would do this every week with you.
Well, and
Okay.
any excuse for dancing money to do a little preaching and teaching, I love it. What can I say?
What speaking engagements do you have coming up? Are you working on any big projects that people should know about?
No, not I'm off to Malta in a couple of days. Because I'm big
Awesome.
into history. My wife and I love history, culture, and the food which dramatize that culture. And anyway, we're off to Malta. We love Sicily, Italy. Malta is sort of an extension of that, with that whole
Yeah.
North African Italian cultural interface. So we love that
Terrific.
sort of thing. And the key thing, and I tell people, is I take 5, 6, 7 books with me, right, on my Kindle because I don't have to carry them, and that's exciting. But I've got stuff coming up all the time, all over the place, and the thing is, at my age, I'm not looking for business, because I got plenty I can write stuff. I don't need that, and I just love doing it. Like talking to you, Ed. You know what a joy it is for an old man to have somebody like you, a young whippersnapper who would be my grandson, actually contacting
That's
me and saying, "Let's talk." That's
I don't know if that's
exciting,
totally
Ed.
true. For anyone listening, I had to track Greg down at CMAA in Anaheim to say, "Hey, I need to talk to you." So thank you for doing this. I really appreciate it.
Love it. It's been a great delight for me. It's fascinating, and it's a wonderful business, and I just love yakking about it. So thanks, Ed.
Thank you for listening. If you find episodes like this helpful, be sure to share it and subscribe on whatever podcast platform you're using. Until next time, keep crushing your club marketing.